All right. So for those of you who are on with us, you can all see the outline here on the screen. I can't see y'all. Where'd you go? Yeah, you can see it?
Yeah.
All right, pull it back. There we go. All right. So for everybody who's hopped on, thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is something we've wanted to do for a while and figured that this was a good time to do it now that state officer applications have been submitted, area officer applications are coming up due. We get questions a lot about how exactly does our NOMCOM process work. And I was happy last summer to do a short rotational workshop with students at camp. And I think that answered a lot of their questions. We had some of the state officers sit in. We did some demonstrations of what those rounds look like. But I would say that our expert here in Louisiana is definitely Mr. Foret, since he served on the National Nominating Committee, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years ago. 2, I think.
Wasn't that long ago. And the process has not changed since then. We model our state process off of National's NOMCOM process because I think that's what's helping to prepare our national officer candidates. That's why our candidates have done so well the last several years, because they're seeing that process over and over again from the area level to the state level, and then when they decide to run for national. So I think it's helping us to pick high quality officer teams. The last several teams we've had have just been fantastic, phenomenal. But there's nothing secretive about this. We don't want anybody to think that it's some big mystery of how this works. There's a very simple, you call it simple. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward numerical / observational process that we use in order to select our officer candidate. So today, Mr. Foret is here. He's going to walk through it with us, and we're going to answer any questions you might possibly have regarding how we select our officers. So, Mr. Foret, I'm just going to go ahead and mute myself, and I'll let you take it away.
Good deal. Thank you, Mr. Lejeune. So before I had went to national NOMCOM, I had served on state NOMCOM and been through the state NOMCOM process, and I was familiar with how we had done it in the state, and got to nationals and realized that there was a really different way of doing this, and it kind of blew my mind at first. But once I kind of got immersed in their way of doing it, I realized that the system really makes sense, and it's designed pretty awesome in a way that it takes a lot of moving parts and simplifies them and takes a lot of variables out. It makes a system that is kind of, you can't train a person or a candidate per se to the system, because your candidates are being judged based off of what we call competencies. And so these competencies are the five main things that National FFA believes that a national officer should have. So when Eric Nelson was there, he had kind of revamped the system, and I think this was the latest version that he had done. I'm not sure who was the original author, but the five main competencies that national officers are selected off of is communication, team player, areas of knowledge, character, and influence. And those are kind of the heartbeat of what this whole system is built around. And so these competencies, at one time we would give NOMCOM a score sheet, and we would say, okay, you're going to ask 3 questions in a personal panel round, and rank them out of 10 or out of 5. I don't remember. I think it was out of 10. Based on how they scored the question, but you aren't really scoring against anything. Now with this system, when a candidate's being scored, you're being scored on a scorecard that's designed to score you against these 5 competencies. How well do you display these 5 essential characteristics of a leader? And that's kind of the heartbeat of the framework of what this whole system's built around.
And to jump in for a second, Mr. Foret, these 5 competencies are scored in every single round. No matter what the round is, those 5 are what your students are being scored on.
Yes. So in every scorecard, every non-com member is given an identical scorecard. So nobody's judging anything different than the next. Every non-com member has an identical scorecard. Their scorecard is broken down by indicators. So an indicator is like just a small tidbit of a competency. So if communication is the competency, the indicator may be nonverbal cues. So in a facilitation round, how did the candidate use nonverbal cues to connect with the students on transitioning from one activity to the next? And throughout the rounds, for every round, the non-com they're gonna grade every candidate on 3 indicators per competency. So 15 total indicators per round, which is kind of clunky, but yeah, every competency is broken down to 3 most essential indicators, and that's what the scorecard looks like. And we'll go over the scorecard at the end, and those are available for you to see on the Louisiana FFA website for you to pick apart and look at, and for you to kind of digest, because that in itself is kind of a big thing to break down. But pretty much what I want to get out of that is that these 5 things is what we're looking for. So it's not, it's not like we're looking for a specific answer or a specific word. We're looking for the 5 essential characteristics of a leader. And really the days of non-com being strictly a quantitative system is not really relevant anymore either. Scores are very important, they're very relevant, and we use scores as a tool. But non-com is quantitative and qualitative. So for every round, when a non-com member is given a scorecard, they're also given a notes document. And so they're told to take very thorough notes in terms of quoting. If a candidate gives a really powerful answer, I want it quoted exactly or verbatim what they said. If there was something that just hits them a little wrong, or something that was inaccurate along those lines, I want it quoted. Not because when you get down to deliberation, it can't be, well, I think I remember them maybe saying something like this. They need to be able to go back in their notes and say, no, I have it written down that candidate number 5 said this on this round, and and they need to be able to prove a point. So scores are very important, and scores are a strong basis, but scores are not everything. But what this qualitative data allows us to do, and all of these notes that we take, it allows us to kind of break down the candidate's performance, not only in a numerical system, but also in a human way, because there is some human aspect to it. On the bias side of it, when we talk about human interaction, we have positive bias and negative bias. When I was on National Non-Com, Lord, I wish I knew how many hours of bias training I went through, because it was an astronomical number of bias training. And I think going into it, we try to prepare our non-com as best as possible to make them understand what bias looks like and how to avoid bias. And at some point, there's not enough preparation that we can avoid all bias throughout the process. And that's why we're going to have non-com coordinators in the room at all times. So in the past, it was Sarah and I. Going forward, it's going to be Sadie and Adam, and they're going to kind of be there mediating bias. In between rounds, after a candidate walks out of a room, there will never be a, man, he did really good. That's unacceptable. That should never happen. There should never be a, gosh, I'm glad that's over. That'll never happen. because those are things that will affect the opinions of others. The biggest thing that we have to control bias is that candidates are not allowed to be discussed until deliberation. So up until the point where we walk in the room and say, okay, we're going to select a state officer team, candidates can't be discussed amongst any other members of the committee. So I remember even when I served on state NomCom and looking back on it, gosh, it was terrible. I mean, we would go through the process and like we talked about candidates and, that was not the right way to be, but that was just what we did. Now moving forward, that's not how we approach things. We make sure that there's a hard boundary of candidates are not going to be addressed or by other committee members or amongst committee members until deliberation happens. Because we don't want to cut anybody short and we don't want to build anybody up. If one person has a really strong opinion of somebody, we don't want that one person's really strong opinion to kind of infect the entire group, because one person's really strong opinion can build a group and one person's really negative opinion can cut a group's opinion down. And in that way, we may lose some really great candidates and some people may get lost in the wash, all because opinions were shared. And so in that conversation, we started talking about how do we cut out really strong positive opinions and really strong negative opinions in the scoring process. So when scores are collected, it's a really time-consuming process, but if we have 13 scores, the highest score and the lowest score are both dropped. That way we have a mean average. We are taking the two outliers out, and if there is let's say my buddy's running for state office and you know what, the whole time I might just pad his scores a little bit. Well, you know what, you pad his scores all day long and then your score is just going to be dropped because you'll be the high score for him, and then we'll just drop your score all in NomCom, and then his average will still end up being an average and it doesn't really matter. And the same for the latter. If you have a personal dislike for somebody, and we try to do that for those reasons. We try to do it looking at it on a quantitative and a qualitative perspective. How do we take both sides of the bias out? And I think we've done as good of a job as possible at this point. I think there are places that we can do better, and we will do better in the future as the process continues to grow. We're always open for suggestions. So, I think that's a really great place that we've gotten there, and it's the strongest our process has been on the bias side in a very long time, or as long as I remember.
Before we move on, Tristan, does anybody have questions up to this point? If you do during this presentation, please feel free to ask. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sometimes I just get carried away.
Oh, no, you're good. All right, I think we can keep going.
So that's kind of what the committee is going to be prepped with before they get to convention. That's what they're going to be told. So they'll be explained how the process works. They'll be prompt on bias. They'll be prompt on all of these things, and the process itself, as well as the candidates. We'll do a committee school and a candidate school, and all of those things will be explained to both sides. At convention, the committee is going to meet for the first time, and they have a really big job to do in a really short amount of time. So we try to get them running as soon as possible. So the first time the committee sits down, we pretty much kind of go around the table. Let's get everybody acquainted. Let's figure out who everybody is, and then we get to work. And so there's some icebreakers. They do a dinner, and over that dinner, we do a working dinner. So they'll review competencies and indicators, talk about schedules, things like that, and making sure that they're, refreshed on how the weekend's going to look. And at that point in time, the committee starts selecting questions. The question selection process is going to be pretty much up to the non-com coordinators. There's two different ways. You can either give the committee a panel of questions and say, okay, here's 25 questions. You can, let's everybody select 3, and then the 3 most common questions is selected. Or you can allow the committee to come up with their own questions, and then we vote on them from there. Most of the time, that's decided on by the committee and the coordinators by a kind of a mutual agreement. Sometimes the committees are like, hey, look, you know what? We rather, y'all give us 25 questions to pick from, and if there's something we really want to ask, we'll ask. But sometimes the committee's like, no, we kind of know what we want to know. Let's pick our own questions, and we'll feel out the committees from there and how involved they want to be in that process, and how efficiently we think the committees can work in coming up with questions and logistics reasons. And it says on here the consideration will be on Google Classroom. There'll be a poll. And so it'll all be predetermined questions. I'm sorry, Ms. Lejeune, I probably should have read that. It'll all be predetermined questions. They'll have a poll, and they'll be allowed to vote on the questions from there.
I know that the committee coordinators will have questions ready, but we do give the committee, they can vote to determine how they want to proceed. If they want to create their own questions, then they'll always have that option.
Right.
It just depends on, like you said, how does the committee perceive their role and what do they want to do?
So the questions that are initially selected when they get theirs for the first panel, we're going to introduce what this first round and the initial panel round is for. And so they're going to be allowed to go over applications, and so they're going to have a general idea of who these candidates are. They're going to know kind of what they've been involved in. They're going to have just a generalized, kind of a big picture of who the candidate pool is. Pretty much what we want the committee to do at this point is to say, okay, you now have this generalized big picture of who our candidate pool is. What are the big holes that you're seeing that we need to fill? Because from the very first time the candidates walk in the room, the committee needs to be able to start kind of putting together data. The data that they collect numerically and in their notes is all things that's going to be put together to come up with a team a couple days later. So we can't waste any time on just a first round of getting comfortable with each other. It has to be a productive round. So this round we're not going to ask candidates any type of gotcha questions. We're not asking anything to stump them. We're not trying to jam candidates in the corner out the gate. The first panel should be a pretty welcoming environment. That's kind of the mood of the room, is that we should have a pretty welcoming environment, and that we should have a set of questions that should give the committee a really good feel of, okay, when we go through these pool of candidates, we now know the big picture of who these people are, and we kind of are starting to feel out, where they stand on their leadership abilities, their speaking abilities, and it all goes back to these competencies. Who are our strong communicators, our team players, areas of who are our knowledgeable people on ag education, ag industry, FFA, who has strong character and influence. And so when we pick these things, we give the candidates the scorecard. We give the committee the scorecard. This is the scorecard that this is what you're judging them off of tomorrow. Here you go. Now, you need to find 3 questions that's going to allow you to get all of this information. It's the candidate's job to provide that information. The committee's going to give them questions that will provide them an opportunity to give them the information, but it's the candidate's job to provide them the information. If the committee asks the candidate a question that talks about working in a team setting, and they don't ever talk about being a team player, and they get straight zeros on team player, well, they should have capitalized on that opportunity, because it's at this point, and when we look at it from a committee standpoint, all of these candidates have had the opportunity to know what are the competencies they're being judged on. So they knew that they should have hit team player. If they didn't, they chose not to capitalize that. That was on them. But the committee.
Tristan, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Can you give us an example of what a first round question would be like?
So like a good first round question, they're very scenario based, in my opinion. It's going to be a lot about, tell me about a time when you had to work on a team with multiple people who had a differing opinion of your own. How did you combat those differing opinions and still work towards a common goal? That would be a really great team player question. And so I was talking about team player because I was thinking about that question in my head. Like in my mind, like we're talking about you could have hit communication, team player, character, and influence in that same question, because differing opinions, teamwork, how do we work together in a common goal? So it's about, if you're going to train a candidate to this program, it's a lot about training them to identify these 5 competencies, and to know, to know how to highlight their own abilities within these competencies. I know a lot of people that probably have really great character, but just don't really know how to highlight it. And so, in terms of from a coaching perspective, I think that's probably a coaching point that I would have to make, is teach your candidates how to identify how to identify the competencies in a question. Very, very scenario based in the personal panel. Your second round is going to be your one-on-ones. This is in the past we've called it round robin, speed dating. They've had a ton of different names for it, but it's all pretty much all the same concept. They get 3 minutes. Is it 3 minutes with each committee member? I don't remember how much time it is.
It's either 3 or 5. On the national level, it's 10, but we don't do 10 here. That's a long time. It's either 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, so somewhere within that. I think it's 3 to 5 minutes. But it's a one-on-one interview with each committee member. This is, in my opinion, in this round, when I go to deliberate teams, and so I think I've deliberated 3 state officer teams now, I think. This round has been the round that more people have collected the most data from, is the one-on-one conversation, because I think it gives them the setting to be more comfortable with each other. And so I think this is a really important round, and I think a lot of people overlook it. The one thing that I have to really note about this round is that for the one-on-one round, the candidate can be asked the same question by multiple non-com members. So if every non-com member asks the same question, it's not a trick. They're not comparing answers. Nobody's saying, oh, well, hold up, he told me 5 and you 6. Oh, no, he's lying. We're not going back and comparing answers. They're not allowed to even talk about answers. So that's not because a lot of candidates freak out over that. And they're like, 4 people asked me the same question. The committee members aren't even allowed to talk to each other about what questions they're asking. So committee member 1 and committee member 5 may ask the same 3 questions and not even know it. So don't, really coach your candidates to don't get tripped up on how many times they get asked the same question or if they get asked repeat questions, etc. Essentially, this is just a one-on-one personal interview. These questions are going to be less scenario based and more kind of tell me about yourself, tell me about your involvement in FFA, tell me about, it's going to be more the committee member getting to know that candidate personally. So when I was training committee members, I would tell them, go over your notes from the last round and try to figure out what you need to know about these candidates. Do you need to know who's super involved, who has the availability of time, figure out what are your kind of holes. I think of everything as we're building a net, where's your holes at? Like, let's fill our holes about each person. And so these are not very scenario based. It's going to be more personal questions, not very deep questions. They're probably going to be shallow. But just kind of getting to know about the person's involvement, what they do, where they're from, kind of like a speed dating type round is essentially what it is. Stand and deliver. Stand and deliver's pretty cool round. Logistical nightmare. But so stand and deliver, the biggest thing with this one is that the stand and deliver and facilitation, their topics are either going to be ag education or FFA. Whatever one is stand and deliver, the opposite is going to be facilitation. You're not going to have 2 ag education, you're not going to have 2 FFAs. Because we don't want to, if one person's really strong in ag education and really weak in FFA or vice versa, we don't want to play into someone's hand and give someone a leg up, etc. So whatever, we'll always make sure that they're opposite of each other. The stand and deliver round, Mr. Lejeune, do you know, in terms of resources, what do we allow on resources and prep materials?
They don't get anything. They get a pencil and a piece of paper.
Okay.
That's it. It's strictly what's in their brain.
Okay. So you'll be given a prompt on stand and deliver. And so for your prompt, it's going to be that you're addressing a board. It's going to be you're giving a speech. I think this is a really important round from the perspective of someone who was a state officer. I think this is a really important round because out the gate, like, you're going to be expected to be able to hold yourself professionally in front of a crowd of people. And like, they're not throwing you into wolves, but like, you need to be able to not crack. And so for stand and deliver, it may be a prompt of, for example, you're invited to speak to Lafourche Parish School Board on the importance of, I don't know, having 12-month contracts. It may not be that rigorous, but something along those lines. That would be a good ag ed topic. And so the nom-com is going to sit probably in like a boardroom type setting, and they're going to have, the committee is going to be the board that they're addressing. And so when they walk in the room, they're going to address the committee as if they're the Lafourche Parish School Board. And at that point, you're not addressing the nom-com. Like, they should address them as whatever the prompt says. If you're addressing the President of the United States of America, address it as the President of the United States of America, and give that speech accordingly. And so I think stand and deliver, when I did it, like we used to always like prep super detailed, like knowledge-based things. And I think now it's more geared towards a speech that a state officer would be asked to give at an event or on behalf of somebody. That's the type of.
There's other rounds to test knowledge. In this round particularly, we want to see, can you stand up and competently speak, competently and confidently,
right.
Regardless what the topic is. So no, they're not extremely in depth.
Right. And so we see a lot of people stumble here, like they try to come in and like pack as many facts as possible because they're still stuck on the old, like this at one time, this used to be like this was the knowledge check. And like, this is not really the knowledge check anymore. So this is more a speaking round. We want to see who can confidently give a speech. And so that's kind of the main goal here, is just be confident and give a speech. Round robin advocacy. This one's pretty fun. They're going to be having a conversation with an industry leader. The three topics are going to be ag education, media, and ag industry. The media round is going to be like a television interview, radio, newspaper interview, something along those lines. For these rounds, kind of similar to the last one, the most important thing is state officers, when they're out the gate, they're going to be expected to be able to hold intelligent conversations with business people. They're going to be able to talk to stakeholders and ag teachers. When they go to national convention, they may have to talk to executive secretaries from other associations and talk about what we're doing in our association, etc. So what the committee is going to be focusing on at that point in time is, can they hold a conversation? So your topic or your prompt is going to be, you're holding a conversation with the president of the Louisiana Beef Cattlemen's Association, encouraging him to sponsor Louisiana FFA, speak to him about the opportunities that young cattlemen have in Louisiana FFA, or something along those lines. And so that's all you're given. And so you walk in and he's probably going to introduce, or he or she, or they're going to introduce themselves to you, introduce yourself to them. And then at that point in time, you're just going to pretty much take the conversation in any direction that you want. There's not going to be any there's not a script, and there's not you have to hit these points. We're not looking for talking points. We're just looking for a competent conversation. And that's what the committee is going to be prepped on, is who can go in and hold a conversation fluently and just make intelligent conversation. And sometimes like people will kind of run out of time and like they'll just make lighthearted conversation, and like you're not crashing and burning, like it's just having conversation. That's what you do in professional settings. And so for the advocacy round, the ag education and the ag industry, that'll both be conversations with people. So it'll probably be like a conversation with a principal and a conversation with an ag industry leader. And then for the media, it's going to be like a TV interview. We've done like an interview with like Alexandria News, Avery Davidson, things like that. And those media interviews, that's the one that's a little different than the other two. Two of them's a conversation. The media interview is more, they're going to ask you questions and you need to be able to, in a conversational way, give answers.
And they'll even put a microphone and a camera on them, like it's simulating you sitting in a TV studio doing an interview.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's always a really fun round to watch. If I can, I try to sit in that room. Because it's neat just to see how they interact with the camera. And so for that situation, make sure that they speak loud and they project. Those things are really important. Just poised, eloquent answers, things like that. The media, like I said, the media round is a little different, and you don't know what you're going to be up against, because it may be a newspaper article where someone's just having a conversation with you, jotting down notes, and they may have a camera on you doing some type of a true TV interview. So prepare for any type of media situation that you could dream up, because if Mr. Lejeune and the non-com coordinators could dream it, it's fair game. And so, yeah, I think that's fun. Facilitation, we've talked about it in one of our meetings, trying to do it like we did Go Teach Ag this year at some of our contests, where we do it and run 2 separate rooms. So we have a prep room and a presentation room. They present in one room, the whole committee moves. They do a workshop here, move back and forth to try to keep things rolling, because we know facilitation notoriously is a very long round, and it's very tiresome for both the candidates and the committee. So yeah, that is something we've taken into account for this upcoming year. For facilitation, the NOMCOM is going to be prepped on things like, this is where it goes back into the competencies really big. They're prevalent in every round, but facilitation, a lot of times people really get caught up on, magic formula and making sure facilitation is that and the other. And look, going into facilitation, being a polished facilitator is really important. Going into facilitation, being a team player and using effective communication and showing good character and influence, that's 4 out of 5 of the competencies. That's probably more important. For facilitation, just remind your candidates to not completely forget that the competencies are what's being judged here still. They're still being judged on a scorecard that's based on these 5 competencies. Nobody is going to be sitting there with a magic formula, or I don't even know, do y'all even still use magic formula? Is that even still a thing?
They don't call it that anymore, but we still do.
Okay, yeah.
But keep in mind, we don't expect these candidates to even know what that is yet. So we're definitely not going to be scoring them on it. They get trained on that once they get elected.
Right. So like, nobody's going to be sitting here with a workshop sheet trying to be like, fill out, candidate didn't read objective 3 times, but they will still be sitting there with a scorecard going over all 5 of the competencies. And so, like I said earlier, the facilitation topic is always going to be opposite of the stand and deliver. The committee will be consulted on how the groups are made, but the committee will not be allowed to make the groups, if that makes sense. So the committee can suggest, hey, we would like to see we'd like to see our candidates grouped from top to bottom, our strongest candidates, grouped from top 3, next 3 from there on out. Or we'd like to see 1 strong candidate with 2 weak candidates and group them there on out. And so the committee can suggest a grouping type, because I think it's important that the committee get to see the candidates in the setting that they feel will answer the most questions for them or fill in the most blanks for them. However, the committee is not going to be able to say, we want to see candidate A with candidate C and D. That's not an option. Nor will the committee be able to know how the candidates are ranking based on their facilitation pairing. So there's always a bunch of scuttlebutt after facilitation. Well, I must be ranked real high because I was in this group. And well, that's really not true. They get grouped different every year. It's all based on how the committee wants to see you Every committee is different, so that's irrelevant. And it doesn't really tell all it does is give the committee a different view of how they want to see the candidates. The advancement is made prior to facilitation, right? Yes. Sorry. The advancement is made prior to facilitation. So the advancement is something I really want to hit hard on because there's always been a lot of talk about it. The way the advancement works.
Tristan, but before we jump on to advancement, does anybody have questions on any of the 6 rounds?
You have some in the chat. Let's see.
You have some in the chat. I can't see it, so if you can pull the chat up, that'd be good.
How many questions will each committee member ask in the one-on-one? Each committee member is going to ask 3 questions in the one-on-one. It's going to be 5 minutes and 3 questions, I believe.
We'll verify those times for you because I need to post those on the website also so that when you practice, you do know exactly what the expectation is. Any others?
I'm sorry. So the advancement is strictly quantitative. There is no discussion that happens behind the advancement. The committee members are not consulted. They're not asked about it. It's strictly a quantitative advancement. So what happens is the data is all going to be put in, and based on how the committee is scoring everybody, all of the candidates are going to be ranked. And so if they're typically the decision's made based on the number of candidates that are there. We like to give the committee at least 14 people-ish to pick from, 14 or 15. So depending on how many candidates we have, depending on how the advancement has to work. But what's going to happen is within that 13 to 15 candidate range, the staff, Mr. Lejeune, and the NOMCOM coordinators are going to look at the data and say, okay, between 13 and 15 candidates, where is the biggest gap? So, if between 14 and 15, there's only a 0.5 points gap, but then between 15 and 16, there's a 5-point gap. Well, then we're going to group 15 in there, and that person will advance. So the advancement's always determined based on where the gap is, kind of between 13 and 15 candidates. And the committee is not ever notified about the advancement until after it's posted. They know it's coming, but the actual candidates know who makes it and who's cut before the committee does. So the advancement's going to be posted, and all of the candidates are going to find out. And then after every candidate knows if they were cut or not, then the committee is going to be brought in a sheet of paper with the advancement, and they're going to be told, okay, here you go. This is everybody who's being advanced on to the next level. And at that point in time, everybody who's not advanced we go into the scorecards, and they're taken off of the last 2 round scorecards. And, pretty much we just proceed on with those 13 to 15 candidates for facilitation in the final personal panel. I talked about facilitation. I didn't talk about the final personal panel. The final personal panel is very similar to the first personal panel in terms of scoring and everything. The rounds are identical. The time's the same. The number of questions are the same. The rounds logistically are the same. The only difference is when I would work with committees, I would tell them, pretty much before we picked final panel questions, I would let them look through all of their notes that they have and say, okay, guys, I want you to go through and find any questions that you may have, anything that you really want to know, anything that's really just kind of cloudy for you. And let's get those questions answered, because this is the last time you're ever going to see these candidates before you got to sit at a table and determine who's a state officer and who's not. And I really try to drive home the weight of the decision they have to make at that point, because I want the committee at this point to start realizing, like, crap, like, I need to, at this point, this is the last time I'll ever see these people, and in a couple hours we have to decide who's state officers. And like, some of these people, you know, their dreams are going to be made, and some of them are going to go home and they'll be very upset. And I want the committee to understand that, because there's a lot of weight that goes with that decision. So normally the attitude and the mood associated with that round is a little different. It's always a little, the questions are a little heavier, because they're really trying to iron out who has the character to lead the organization, who has the influence to be our next state president. And I think during that round, those decisions probably get made. And when we start picking a state president and a state secretary, it's answers from the final panel that get brought up. Because we ask questions from the final panel will be things like, you know, tell me about a time that you let somebody down that was very important to you. How did that affect your relationship with that person, and how did you make that up, or something like that? Because those things show character. Those things show personal growth. People, a lot of times people come out of that round crying. The committee we're not trying to make you cry. They don't want you to cry. I think it's a very emotional round. It's a very emotional time. The goal is not to cry. I think some people come in and like, oh, if the committee didn't cry, I bombed it. No, that's not the goal. You don't necessarily want the committee to cry. If it happens, you know, maybe you really shared a personal story, then that was part of your experience. That shouldn't be a goal that somebody sets for themselves. It's just an opportunity for the committee to get to know you on a deeper level, and for them to get to truly see how you possess those 5 competencies, and how you carry them out. So that's the final panel, the personal panel. I think that's a really important round. And it's a round that people have a lot of misconceptions about. At that point, once the personal panel's done, all scoring is turned in, and so then that's when the NomCom coordinators go and start running final reports and getting all of the data prepared to give the committee for deliberation. And so the deliberation process is really that's what I love about the process the most. I think it's my favorite part, because I think it's pretty neat how we do it. The way deliberation works is when we get in the room, the committee members first off are given time to just look through and process all of the data. So they're given, for every candidate, they're given the candidate's average score. So at one point, we were given, like, this candidate scored 1,500 points. And like, what was 1,500 points? Like, okay, what did that mean? Now, the way it works is they're given averages. So the scorecard is out of 5. So the scorecard is 0, 1, 3, or 5. They're given averages. So this person scored a 4.23175 out of 5 in communication. This person scored a 3 point whatever number in team player. And so they're given their average score for each of the 5 competencies on one sheet, and then they're given their average score for each round. And so you could break down that data in a couple different ways. And so the way I try to explain it to the committee is, okay, we provide you with all of this data that we collected, all of this quantitative data, and this was all the scores that you submitted. We're giving it to you. That's about 55% of what we're going to use to make a team. And that's very important, and we can't be ignored, but it's just a tool. The other 45% is all of the notes that are taken, because when we do all of the bias training and we have all of these people monitoring bias, then we can use all of these really good notes. And I will say, in the last couple of years, we've had great notes being taken and really great data, qualitative data being pulled from these rounds that's discussed in deliberation. And so that's the other portion of the process that also can't be ignored, is that, hey, you know what, this person may have said, maybe this person scored really high here. Maybe they scored 4.7 out of character, but right here, they in one-on-ones, they told me this story where, they did something that shows terrible character. So, that's something that can't be ignored either. So then that's a conversation that we have to have as a committee. And that's where you kind of have to balance those quantitative versus qualitative assessments. In deliberation, we do top-down processing. So the way it works is we put up pictures of all the candidates on the board with their names on it, broken up into 4 areas. So on a wall, we tape it into 4 quadrants, we break it up into 4 areas, and we have the pictures of the candidates in their respective areas. That's on one wall. On the other wall, we have all of the officers on a team, president all the way down, and then on the wall across from it, we have the wall of other opportunities. And so then at that point, we have a table lined with sticky notes, like pads of sticky notes. And so I give them time to break down their data and figure out, okay, what is kind of the general, what is their personal general consensus. I still won't let them talk about anything, about any of the candidates at this point, because I don't want them discussing it. And so the first step in deliberation is I tell everybody to come up, I go through all their data, the scores, their research, and take one sticky note and go put it on the headshot of the one person they feel deserves to be president. And so typically they go, and you end up with about 5 different people with sticky notes on it. And normally you got about 3 of them that have the majority of sticky notes, and you have a couple outliers with 1 or 2. And then I always tell them, if you feel throughout the process, we're going to do a thing. I call it a temperature check. If you feel really good about something, give me a thumbs up. If you're really confident, if you say 100%, yeah, this is how I feel, I'm confident, give me a thumbs up. If you're comfortable, but you're not confident, if you say, you know what, that's not 100% how I feel, but I'm like 60% of the way there, just give me a little sideways thumb. And if you're like, nope, that's not what we're doing, give me a thumbs down. And so then we use that kind of temperatures to check throughout the whole process, and it just kind of lets me feel the room. And so with that process, I normally go through, and so anybody who has less than 2 sticky notes, I'm like, okay, guys, we have 13 people in the room. These people, only 2 people felt like they should be president. Who feels comfortable that they're probably not going to be president? Normally, we have a general consensus that they won't be president. And so we just talk about our main contenders. So there's normally 3 or 4. And so at that point in time, I break it down candidate by candidate. So I take, candidate number 1, and we talk about all of the positives for this candidate. So, okay, and I open up the floor. Everything positive you have to say about this candidate, nothing negative. And so we go around the room, and I just kind of monitor, making sure nobody's repeating anything, making sure nobody's saying anything really overly biased, anything opinionated, just hardcore evidence. If they say something, it has to be, I believe that this candidate would be a good president because in personal panel 1, he said that he was, X, Y, and Z. And I tell them, like, if you're going to say something, you better use that format. You better say, I believe this because in round blank, I witnessed this. And if you can't tell me that, don't even raise your hand. I don't want to hear it. If you can't tell me where you heard it and what you heard, I'm sorry, we're cutting it out. And we do that, so on and so forth. So we break down every candidate, the positives and the negatives. So I let everybody talk about everything positive they have to say, everything negative they have to say. And then so if there's 3 people, let's say there's 3 people that the majority thought could be president, we'll talk the positives and negatives for all of them. And then I'll take all the sticky notes off and pass them out and okay, let's go put a sticky note on the person out of these 3 that you now think could be president. And typically that'll narrow it down to 2. And we'll start the process all over again. And so from there, we'll select the president. And typically whoever, from there, after we have a president, we'll put our president and they'll move on. Then we'll do our secretary, our 4 vice presidents. After we have a president, secretary, and 4 vice presidents. And the reason we do president and secretary first, and we have the 4 quadrants on the board, is that if there's an area with only 1 candidate, so if there's an area with only 1 possible candidate, by default, that person cannot be area vice, that person has to be area vice president. So they are not eligible for president or secretary because in our bylaws, we must have a vice president representing each area. So the reason I break it up is to say, hey, look, this area only has 1 candidate. Sorry, guys, this person's not eligible for president or vice president. And what that also allows us to do is by doing president and vice president first, is that we make sure that the 2 most competent people are the 2, our president and vice president, our president and secretary, then do vice presidents. And at that point, I pull the tape off the wall, put all of the candidates in 1 pile, and we don't really worry about areas. We just talk about them as a whole. And we just go from the top all the way to the bottom, and we move people either to the team or to other opportunities. And so that process normally takes about 4 hours. And it's a long process, but it's a very thorough process. And every single candidate from the top all the way to the bottom, we will talk about every positive and every negative. And if we spend 15 minutes talking about the president, we'll probably spend 15 minutes talking about the person who doesn't make the team, because we want to make sure that we thoroughly evaluate the positives and negatives of who should and shouldn't serve as a state officer for our organization. Because at the end of the day, we are selecting a state officer team, and that is really important.
For those of you who are unaware, since COVID, since we've been back in person, this deliberation takes place a few hours before the final business session. We implemented that to avoid any possibility of that nominating committee report being leaked out prior to the business session, and that's stopped that. Absolutely. I mean, we take their cell phones and we escort the committee to the session hall before the business session starts. So there's no chance that anybody's going to get a committee report before the session.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I know, like, it was like taking a sip from a fire hydrant. I'm really sorry about that. But.
And I'll say this also, this last section, what to do if something should be disregarded for scoring. I personally do not have contact with the committee as they're going through. I don't sit in on rounds. I will answer questions for the committee coordinators if asked. If they ask me to verify scores, like check, make sure the math is right, I'll do that for them. But I don't give them any direction because I don't feel that's fair for me and my role as state staff to be involved in that. That's why we have committee coordinators and the adults on the committee to provide that extra layer of protection for the process. So, and like you see there, like if there is an issue, I might help them work through it, but ultimately the committee votes on how they want to handle things. And we've done that before. We've had issues that come up and the committee votes and they decide what they want to do. And we move on because it is an appointed committee that's supposed to be democratically selecting these candidates.
The majority of things that, I mean, throughout this process, it is designed when decisions are made, the committee has a lot of autonomy to, other than the actual process itself, the committee has autonomy to, the selection of questions, how, if there's kind of a gray area, how do we proceed? The committee decides all of that because, like Mr. Lejeune said, they are a committee, and we do trust their leadership.
We're right at an hour, Tristan. So as we wrap up, I did want to show everyone on our website where you can find the scorecards. These are open. These are the exact cards that we use. We have a digital version of them. Obviously, we do it on Google Classroom, but this is the card. So in the website, if you go to the students portal, and just FYI, if you were in the advisors portal, you got to log out of that one to get into the student portal, but it's in the student portal. And if you scroll down to where we see area or officer candidates and nominating committees, if you click on that link, it'll be down at the bottom. Those are the scorecards that we use for each of the rounds. And if we open them up, you can see what we were discussing regarding competencies. So this is exactly what the committee sees whenever they open their Google Classroom. They select the student's name, and then there you go, 0 through 5. And I don't think we touched on it, Tristan, but when they select 0 through 5, they're not given an option for 2 or 4, just so that we can separate those scores. Because if you give those middle options, a lot of times they'll try to thread the needle and sit somewhere in the middle, and it gets very difficult to separate those scores out when you're trying to make a decision. So we kind of force the committee to make a decision whenever they're scoring. So, for example, here's communication, and there's one of the indicators under communication for this particular round. Here's the second indicator for that particular round. Here's the third one for that round. And then we go on the team player. So you can go through each of the scorecards and see all 5 competencies are always there. And we assess 3 indicators for each competency each time you go through. All right. Does anybody have questions? All right. Well, Mr. Foret, you are a wealth of knowledge. I'm very happy that you got to serve on the National NomCom a few years ago, because that absolutely helped us refine our process, make it better. What we do with our NomCom process, if you were wondering, it's codified in association policy. Our executive board adopted association policies back in the spring, and the policy states that we will model our process off of the National FFA selection process. So that's why this is what we follow. And if that changes, then the executive board will have the ability to adjust it. But I think it's serving us well, and I'm appreciative of people like Mr. Foret who've helped us out with it. So thank you again. If no one has any questions, we'll wrap up. And again, this will be shared online so that you can go reference it again in the future. So thank you, Mr. Foret, and thank you everybody for joining.
Yes, sir. Thank you.